Honor now to welcome Ambassador Ami Bera of the 7th District of California. He's the ranking Vice Chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and Co-Chair of the Congressional Caucus on Korea. Congressman.
Not quite yet an ambassador, but hopefully an ambassador of goodwill here. You know, just to get a sense of who I'm speaking to today, how many in the audience are veterans or alumni of one of the visitor cultural exchange programs? Wonderful. How many State Department employees here as well? And you know, to those employees of the State Department, let me say from this member of Congress, and I think from many of our colleagues, thank you for the work that you're doing representing us and representing the United States around the world. You know, we're at an interesting place right now. I mean, if we think about, you know, our own domestic engagement, and we put it in context, in the post-World War II era, the United States engagement in the world was necessary to rebuild Europe, to rebuild Asia, to create stable democracies and partners like Singapore. And Ambassador, I appreciated your comments, like Japan. And you know, one of those programs that I think paid huge dividends was the International Student Exchange Program. The Ambassador touched on the importance of students that were coming here to get their education and training, you know, in the late 50s and the 60s, early 70s. I can't tell, you know, I travel a lot in my role as Vice Ranking Member on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and you know, when visiting, you know, elected leaders in other countries, you know, members of parliament, both allies and adversaries, I'm struck by the number of those leaders that received their education in the United States. And there's something to be said about that diplomatic mission. Now, some of that's changed as the conversation around immigration and other issues have changed here in the United States. But the long-term benefits of that cultural exchange, of folks from all around the world coming to the United States to gain their education. Now, I will be critical of our domestic policy because we don't send enough students from the United States to other countries to get their education. But the benefit there is, even if governments disagree, the people get to know one another. They get to know the culture, the values, and that is a lifelong impact and effect. Now, I'm the son of immigrants from India who came here in the 1950s for their education. They ended up staying and, you know, investing here, but as a nation, we're a nation of immigrants, and that diversity is reflected in this room. The importance of the cultural exchange programs, while not everyone can come to a 4-year college degree or an 8-year college degree, even if it's for a month at a time, is incredibly important, because the folks that are coming on those cultural exchange programs are oftentimes going to be those leaders in their home countries when they return. And you know, we recognize it from the members of Congress to the members of Parliament. You know, certainly we try to take our time to build that relationship with our colleagues in other countries, but it's incredibly important. And here's why. Today you will, you know, your focus is on Asia. You know, the ambassador touched on the vibrancy of the region. You know, I think part of the reason why TPP was such an important deal is you were talking about 40% of the global economy. You were talking about the fastest growing regions in the world. And the Trans-Pacific Partnership, from my perspective, was not just about economic exchange. It was about cultural exchange. It was about strategic exchange. And I may be biased because my focus is Asia and the Pacific here in Congress, but I really do think this will be the most vibrant region in the world moving forward. And the importance of that people-to-people tie, that government-to-government tie, and knowing one another is incredibly important. Now, I was at a breakfast this morning where they were framing the foreign policy challenges in 2018. And you know, you could take a very pessimistic view at the global challenges, But I'll actually choose to take an optimistic view. Because yes, we've got challenges ahead of us, but the 21st century is still relatively young. If you think about it, 100 years ago, we were in the midst of a world war. There was still a second world war to come. So we don't know what that future looks like. But I look around this room, I see a lot of young faces in this room. And I think it is up to us to help empower that cultural exchange and those global ties. Because as I look at the generation that's rising, I have a millennial daughter, and as I look at that millennial generation, they're already immersed in a global economy. They'll go on the internet and they like that blouse that's made in Spain. They're going to purchase it. They have friends on Facebook that are all across this world. They are already looking at the world from a global perspective. That is a good thing. They are a much more communal generation. And I think there is an urgency now for us to create that framework by which to help foster those relationships and grow those relationships. Now, the U.S. engagement in the 21st century may be different than the last 70 years. And in fact, I think there's an urgency for it to be different. For the United States to partner with countries like Singapore that share similar values of free market opportunity, of democracy, of human rights, of the rule of law, to partner together and go into third countries, to go into countries like India as they're starting to emerge and become global powers, to build those relationships, again, founded upon the people-to-people experience that you'll be advocating for, to create a context where other countries that can go either direction, let's use China as an example, to say, China, it's much better to join with us. It's in your interest, it's in our interest, and it's in the region's interest. I think that can and should be the paradigm in the 21st century. These partnerships amongst nations that are then pushing forward those shared common values of humanity, of free markets, of the rule of law. Now, again, the 21st century is not written. I think the 21st century, if we're intentional about it, will be one of a more interlinked global community that has those freedoms in it. And I think that would be a good 21st century. So for all of you, thank you for taking the time to spend some time here on the Hill. Tell your stories. If you're a veteran of cultural exchange, talk about why it's so important and what it means back, as you return to your home country, but talk about why these investments are incredibly important. It's much better to invest here and invest in that dialogue and invest in that friendship than it is to have an adversarial relationship. So thank you for being here and thank you for what you do.